Deep inside the limestone dark, far from daylight and weather and the ordinary noise of the living world, a human hand presses pigment against stone and leaves behind a shape that should not feel so close to us, but does. 40,000 years pass. Ice sheets grow and shrink. Rivers change their courses. Animals disappear. Forests advance, retreat, and return in unfamiliar forms. Generations are born, speak, dream, fear, hunt, bury, remember, and vanish. Then, at last, someone enters the cave again and sees that hand still waiting on the wall, not as a fossil, not as a bone, not as a tool dropped by accident, but as a deliberate sign. A person stood here. A person reached out. A person wanted something to remain. That is where the mystery begins, not with a lost city or a buried king, but with a mark in darkness from a world so old that almost everything else has been erased. Around 40,000 years ago, across parts of Europe and Asia, human behavior seems to cross a strange threshold. The archaeological record begins to fill with objects that are not merely useful. There are carved figures, painted animals, ornaments, pigments ground with care, flutes made from bone, burials touched with ritual possibility, and cave walls transformed into spaces of memory. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how sudden this change truly was. But something unmistakable appears in the record. Human beings are no longer only surviving in the landscape, they are interpreting it. The world outside these caves is not gentle. Much of the planet is held in the long grip of the Ice Age. Enormous animals move across open plains and cold steppes. Mammoths graze under hard skies. Woolly rhinoceroses push through frozen grasslands. Lions, hyenas, bears, wolves, and humans all share the same dangerous geography. Fire matters, shelter matters, a missed migration route, a failed hunt, a bitter season arriving too early, can decide whether a group continues or disappears. Yet in this severe world, people spend time making things that do not directly fill the stomach. They gather red ochre, they pierce shells, they carve ivory, they enter caves where no one can live comfortably and leave images in places where sunlight never reaches. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. The strange power of this 40,000-year-old mystery is that it does not ask only what ancient people made. It asks what changed inside them, or around them, or between them. For a long time, the story seemed simple. Modern humans arrived, bringing a new mind into an old world. They painted, carved, planned, spoke, imagined, and eventually replaced other human groups who could not do the same. But archaeology rarely allows simple stories to survive untouched. Neanderthals were not brutish shadows. They made tools, controlled fire, cared for one another, and may have used pigments and ornaments. Denisovans, known at first from fragments of bone and genetic traces, were part of a wider human world that was far more tangled than anyone expected. Even the timeline of symbolic behavior has grown deeper and less tidy, with discoveries suggesting that the roots of imagination may stretch much farther back than 40,000 years. Still, around this age, the record changes in a way that is difficult to ignore. The objects become more numerous, more varied, more expressive. Cave art appears with startling confidence. Some animals are drawn with such precision that their bodies seem to move in torchlight. Some figures are not animals at all, or not only animals. They combine human and beast in ways that feel ritual, mythical, or psychological, though no single explanation fully accounts for them. In one place, A small ivory figure with the body of a human and the head of a lion emerges from deep time. In another, hand stencils gather on cave walls like a crowd of vanished witnesses. Elsewhere, dots, lines, signs, and repeated marks suggest patterns whose meanings are lost, but not their intention. What makes the mystery harder is that these early works do not look like clumsy first attempts. They often appear already mature. The animals have weight, the lines have control. The placement within caves can seem deliberate, sometimes hidden in chambers that require effort, risk, and light to reach. This does not mean art appeared from nowhere. Nothing in human evolution truly appears from nowhere. But the surviving record gives the impression of a door opening suddenly, revealing a room already occupied. Behind that door may lie thousands of years of missing experiments, perishable materials that rotted away, traditions carried in bodies and voices instead of stone. What survives in the record suggests brilliance. What does not survive may have been even larger. Imagine the person who enters the cave, not as a primitive caricature, but as a human being moving carefully through cold air and mineral darkness. A torch burns with animal fat or resinous wood, throwing restless light over stone. The cave is not silent in the simple way an empty room is silent. It breathes and drips. Footsteps change their sound as the passage narrows. Shadows enlarge the body and break it apart. The wall ahead is not a blank surface but a living shape of bulges, cracks, hollows, and curves. A ridge of stone becomes the back of a bison. A natural swelling becomes the shoulder of a horse. The artist does not only impose an image onto rock, the artist seems to find an image already waiting there. This detail matters because it hints at a mind working cross worlds, the seen and the imagined, the practical and the sacred, the animal outside and the animal inside memory. These people know animals with an intimacy modern observers can barely approach. They know tracks, breathing patterns, seasonal movement, the weight of danger in a herd, the moment a wounded creature turns. Their art is not decoration in the modern domestic sense. It is made in a world where animals are food, threat, material, rival, teacher, and perhaps spirit. Whether these images are hunting magic, clan memory, initiation scenes, mythic storytelling, or something no modern category can hold, they reveal a mind refusing to let the world remain merely physical. And yet, the cave walls do not explain themselves. That is the ache at the centre of the mystery. Archaeologists can date mineral crusts, analyse pigments, map handprints, compare tools, sequence ancient DNA, and reconstruct vanished climates from ice and sediment. They can show that people moved across continents, met other human groups, exchanged genes, survived brutal environmental swings, and created symbolic objects of astonishing age. But they cannot ask the maker what the image meant. They cannot recover the song sung in the chamber, if there was one. They cannot know whether a child watched, whether a hunter remembered an animal, whether an elder taught a pattern, whether fear, grief, hunger, trance, play, or devotion guided the hand. 40,000 years ago sits close enough for us to recognize the human gesture, and far enough away for its meaning to dissolve. That is why the mystery endures. It is not simply that scientists cannot explain a painting, a figurine, or a handprint. It is that these traces appear at the threshold of something immense, the emergence, spread, or deepening of the symbolic human world. From this threshold, eventually, come myths, burials, monuments, agriculture, cities, empires, writing, laws, astronomy, music, and history itself. But here, in the cave, before all of that, there is only darkness, stone, pigment, breath, and the almost unbearable nearness of a mind reaching across time. Outside the cave, the world is not the world we know. The horizon is wider, colder, and more exposed, with great distances of grass, gravel, scrub, and wind where forests will one day return. The air carries the smell of smoke, damp hides, crushed plants, animal fat, and frozen earth. In some regions, glaciers lock enormous volumes of water away from the sea, lowering coastlines and exposing lands that later generations will never see. Valleys are broader. Rivers follow courses that will not last. Islands are joined to continents. Plains stretch where shallow seas now cover the drowned footprints of Ice Age travellers. The planet is familiar in outline, but altered in every detail that matters to survival. 40,000 years ago, the Ice Age is not a single frozen moment. It is unstable, restless, and uneven. Cold periods tighten their grip, then soften, then return with new severity. Environments shift across centuries, sometimes across human lifetimes. A valley that supports herds for generations may become less reliable. A migration route may open or close. A coastline rich in shellfish may retreat or drown. Groups who survive are not merely strong, they are flexible, observant, and deeply knowledgeable. They carry maps in memory, not on skin or stone, and those maps must be updated as the world changes around them. Across Europe and Western Asia, modern humans are moving into territories already known by other humans. Neanderthals have lived in many of these landscapes for hundreds of thousands of years. They understand cold country, stone, fire, and large prey with the sophistication once denied to them. Farther east, Denisovans and other poorly understood populations leave traces in DNA and scattered fossils. The human world is not empty, and it is not simple. It is a mosaic of groups. Some separated for long stretches of time, some overlapping, some meeting long enough to exchange genes and perhaps tools, roots, dangers, and ideas. The evidence remains incomplete, but it suggests a deep past full of contact rather than clean isolation. The animals make this world feel almost mythical, though they're not myths at all. Mammoths move in herds, their tusks curving like pale moons through dusty light. Reindeer, horse, bison, ibex, aurochs, and saiga antelope travel across different zones of the Ice Age landscape. Cave bears sleep in darkness and sometimes die there, leaving bones in chambers later entered by humans. Cave lions hunt without manes, powerful and silent. Spotted hyenas crack bones and compete for the same shelters people might want. The great beasts are not background scenery. They shape human movement, diet, danger, imagination, and art. To live among them is to live inside a constant negotiation with other forms of power. For small human groups, survival depends on attention. A broken spear point matters. A change in wind matters. The fat level of an animal before winter matters. So does the location of flint, the availability of fuel, the timing of births among prey, the memory of water, and the trust between people who must share work and risk. A group may include skilled hunters, gatherers, toolmakers, children, elders, injured individuals, and those whose knowledge is held less in strength than in memory. What survives archaeologically is often stone and bone, but what made life possible was much wider teaching, patience, cooperation, story, and the ability to imagine what is not immediately visible. This is where the mystery begins to deepen. The same mind that can track an animal across broken ground can also track meaning across time. The same memory that recalls a distant valley can hold a tale of ancestors, warnings, forbidden places, or successful hunts. The same hand that shapes a blade can shape a bead, a flute, or a painted line. There is no sharp wall between survival and symbolism. In an Ice Age world, symbolism may have been survival. Ornaments can signal identity. Marks can bind groups. Rituals can teach rules. Stories can preserve ecological knowledge. A painted animal might be many things at once: memory, instruction, desire, fear, offering, and art. Yet scientists have to be careful here. It is tempting to fill the darkness with certainty, to decide that every cave painting is religion, every handprint is initiation, every red stain is burial ritual. But the record resists that kind of confidence. Some pigment may be practical, some marks may be playful, some objects may have meanings that change across time or differ between groups. Scholars still debate how much can be inferred from pattern, placement, and repetition. The important point is not that every object has one grand secret meaning. The important point is that humans are increasingly leaving behind traces of worlds that exist not only in matter, but in shared imagination. Lesser-known details make this Ice Age world even stranger. In some places, people may have used caves not for living, but for special visits, returning to chambers where footprints, lamps, pigments, and marks accumulated over generations. In others, they transported shells or unusual stones over long distances, suggesting networks wider than a single valley. Some ornaments are made from materials that had to be selected carefully, pierced, shaped, and worn. A bead is small, but it implies a social world large enough for appearance to matter. It implies that someone sees and is seen, that someone belongs, or wishes to belong, or wishes to be recognized. The climate adds pressure to all of this. Ice Age environments can be rich, but they are also unpredictable. Cold steppe landscapes may support huge herds, yet they demand mobility. Warmer intervals may bring new plants and animals, but also change old hunting patterns. Volcanic eruptions, sudden cold snaps, and regional droughts leave marks in sediments and ice cores, though connecting each event to human behavior remains difficult. No single explanation fully accounts for why symbolic culture becomes so visible around this period. Climate may be one force, migration another, population density another, contact between groups another, chance preservation another still. And beneath all these forces lies the ordinary fragility of human life. The people of this world do not know they live in prehistory. They do not know that future scientists will argue over their tools and pigments. They wake into weather. They tend fires. They repair clothing. They carry children. They mourn losses. They listen in the dark for predators and for other humans. Their world is full of practical demands, but also full of unseen boundaries, places remembered, animals respected, dangers named, dead perhaps carried in memory long after the body is gone. By the time a hand reaches a cave wall, then it does not emerge from emptiness. It comes from a landscape of cold winds, animal migrations, shifting climates, vanished human relatives, social bonds, and hard-earned knowledge. The mark in the cave is only the visible end of something much larger. Behind it stands a world before certainty, where survival depends on reading every sign the land offers, and where the human mind is beginning to leave signs of its own. The first traces are easy to underestimate because they are not monuments. They are stains, scratches, outlines, smudges of mineral colour, and shapes that only become meaningful when someone notices they were made by choice. A hand pressed to stone, a cloud of pigment blown around fingers, a line drawn across a wall in a place where nature does not make lines that way, a cluster of dots set too deliberately to be accidental. These are quiet remains, but they carry a force that tools alone do not. A blade can tell us that a person cut meat, hide, wood, or plant fiber. A hand stencil tells us that a person entered darkness and marked presence itself. In the deep chambers of Ice Age caves, the human body becomes both instrument and image. The hand is placed flat against stone, and pigment is sprayed or dabbed around it, leaving a negative shape when the hand pulls away. Sometimes the fingers seem complete. Sometimes they appear shortened, bent, hidden, or intentionally folded. Scholars still debate what these variations mean. Some may reflect injury, frostbite, disease, counting systems, signals, ritual gestures, or simply the position of fingers during the making of the stencil. The evidence remains incomplete, but the result is hauntingly direct. Unlike an animal painting, which transforms observation into representation, the handprint is a trace of contact. It is not a picture of a person. It is the absence left by a person. This matters because the cave is not an ordinary place. It is not a comfortable settlement with hearths, rubbish, tools, and daily life spread across the floor. Many decorated caves are difficult to reach, cold, dark, and uneven. Some require crawling, climbing, or passing through narrow corridors where torchlight fails quickly if fuel runs low. People had to bring light with them, and light had to be managed. Small stone lamps, burning animal fat with plant fiber wicks, have been found in some Ice Age cave contexts. That detail is small, but it changes the scene. Art in darkness is not casual doodling in the modern sense. It requires planning, fuel, knowledge of the cave, and enough social permission or purpose to spend precious time below ground. The walls themselves seem to have guided the makers. In some caves, natural bulges, cracks, and mineral flows are incorporated into images. A curve of stone becomes the belly of a horse. A fissure becomes the back line of a bison. A swelling becomes the shoulder of a mammoth. The artist does not treat the wall as flat emptiness. The wall already has a kind of hidden life, and the image draws it out. This may be one reason cave art feels so alive even after tens of thousands of years. It was made with the cave rather than merely on it. Torchlight would have deepened the effect, causing painted animals to shift as shadows moved, as though the stone itself were remembering motion. Not all marks are spectacular. Some are modest, repeated, and puzzling. Dots, bars, chevrons, grids, ladder-like signs, finger tracings, and abstract forms appear beside or apart from animals. Their meanings are among the most difficult problems in Paleolithic art. They may be symbols, tallies, clan marks, seasonal references, teaching signs, ritual notations, or something entirely different. No single explanation fully accounts for their variety, but their repetition across distances suggests that Ice Age people were not only making isolated pictures, they were using signs. Whether those signs carried language-like meaning, memory cues, or social codes remains unresolved. Yet their presence complicates the old idea that early art was simply a burst of animal admiration. A lesser-known and strangely intimate trace is the presence of finger flutings, lines drawn through soft clay or moon milk deposits on cave surfaces. Some were made by adults, others possibly by children. In certain caves, The height and spacing of marks suggest that young people may have participated in these underground visits. This does not mean children made the great animal paintings, and it does not prove a school or ceremony in any simple way. But it reminds us that symbolic worlds are learned. A child brought into a cave is not only being shown stone, the child is being introduced to fear, wonder, rules, images, and perhaps stories that bind a group to places beyond daylight. The presence of children also brings the mystery closer. It is easy to imagine ancient art as the work of isolated shamans or master hunters, and some images may indeed have belonged to restricted knowledge. But the record hints at a broader social world. Footprints preserved in cave floors sometimes show people moving together. In rare cases, paths through caves can be reconstructed a person crossing damp clay, pausing, turning, slipping, or following another. These footprints are not as famous as paintings, but they are among the most human remains imaginable. They show not an abstract culture, but bodies in motion. They show someone choosing where to step. Pigment itself carries another layer. Red ochre, manganese black, charcoal, and other mineral colours had to be gathered, processed, mixed, and applied. Ochre especially has a deep human history, stretching far earlier than 40,000 years in Africa and elsewhere. It may have been used for hide working, insect protection, adhesive recipes, body painting, ritual, or decoration. Its meanings likely varied. What survives in the records suggests that colour mattered long before the famous cave paintings. By the time Ice Age artists cover stone with red and black forms, they may be drawing on traditions far older than the surviving images themselves. This is one reason the so-called sudden appearance of art must be handled with care. The cave walls are dramatic because they survive, but people may have painted skin, wood, hide, bark, bone, and other perishable materials for ages before cave art becomes visible to archaeology. They may have sung, danced, told stories, carved snow, arranged feathers, or marked bodies in ways that left no durable trace. The archaeological record is not a complete archive of ancient creativity. It is a biased survivor, favouring stone, bone, mineral, and accident. The mystery is not only why symbolic expression appears, it is why certain kinds of symbolic expression begin to survive in such striking forms. Still, the cave evidence changes everything because it fixes imagination in place. A painted animal on a wall is not carried away like a decorated tool. It remains in a landscape, sometimes in a chamber revisited across generations. It creates a destination. People can return to it, add to it, remember it, teach beside it, fear it, or avoid it. In this way, a cave can become more than shelter or geology. It becomes a memory chamber. The animals on the wall outlast the animals outside. The handprints outlast the hands. The signs outlast the voices that explain them. And there is the heart of the problem. The marks are visible, but the system behind them is gone. We see pattern, effort, placement, repetition, and skill, but not the full web of meaning. Scientists can identify pigments, date mineral layers, analyze style, compare motifs, and map the acoustic qualities of chambers. They can show that some decorated spaces were used deliberately and that the images were not random accidents. But the final step remains unreachable. The cave does not tell us whether a handprint means identity, prayer, warning, memory, play, initiation, or something modern language cannot easily name. So the mystery grows darker and richer. These hands in the darkness are not primitive beginnings in any simple sense. They are the surviving edges of minds already capable of abstraction, memory, symbolism, and placemaking. They belong to people who know the cold world outside with exacting practical intelligence, yet still enter the underground to create forms that hunger alone cannot explain. In the long story of humanity, this is one of the first times the inner world leaves a durable shadow on the outer one. The hand withdraws. The pigment remains. 40,000 years later, we stand before the same wall, and the silence still feels occupied. The strange thing about the great cultural change around 40,000 years ago is not that humans become intelligent then. They are already intelligent. Long before the most famous cave paintings, earlier humans make tools, control fire, move through difficult landscapes, butcher large animals, care for injured companions, and solve problems that would defeat an untrained modern person very quickly. The old idea of a dim prehistoric mind suddenly waking into brilliance is too simple, and in many ways unfair. What appears in the record is not the birth of intelligence itself, but the widening visibility of a different kind of intelligence, symbolic, social, cumulative, and restless. This is why the mystery can feel like an impossible leap. In some places, after long stretches of archaeological continuity, there is suddenly a richer variety of forms. Stone tools become more standardized and specialized. Blades are struck from prepared cores with remarkable planning. Bone, antler, and ivory become raw materials for objects that require patient shaping. Personal ornaments appear in greater numbers. Pigments are used more widely. Portable art emerges. Musical instruments appear. Cave walls become image-bearing surfaces. A world of meaning begins to harden into objects that archaeologists can actually recover. It looks like an explosion, though the fuse may have been burning for a very long time. The phrase often used for this transformation is the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, though many scholars now treat that wording cautiously. A revolution sounds sudden, clean, and universal. The evidence is messier. In Africa, symbolic behavior has deeper roots, with engraved ochre, shell beads, pigment use, and complex technologies appearing far earlier than 40,000 years ago. In parts of Europe, the record around this time looks especially dramatic, partly because caves, limestone landscapes, and preservation conditions allow so much to survive. What seems like a sudden leap may also be a spotlight falling on one region and one set of materials, while earlier, quieter traditions remain partly invisible. Even so, the change is real enough to demand explanation. Around this period, modern humans are spreading across new territories, and their archaeological signature often includes a broader toolkit than many earlier assemblages. Instead of relying mainly on stone flakes and points, people increasingly use composite technologies, combining different materials into tools whose parts come from different sources and require different skills. A spear point may need stone, wood, sinew, adhesive, and heat treatment. Clothing may require scraping tools, awls, needles, hides, fibers, and knowledge of fit. Ornaments require selection, drilling, polishing, and social agreement that such things matter. These are not merely clever tricks, they are systems. Systems depend on teaching. A person does not casually invent a full blade-making tradition alone beside a fire and then pass it on by accident. Techniques must be learned, corrected, remembered, and repeated. They require attention to sequence strike here, prepare there, turn the core, change the angle, choose this material, reject that one. The more complex the technology becomes, the more important shared knowledge becomes. This is one reason the 40,000-year mystery is not only about individual genius, It is about networks of minds. Innovation becomes powerful when it survives the death of the innovator. Language may be part of the answer, but it is difficult to prove from stone and bone. Modern humans almost certainly have rich spoken language by this period, yet the precise timing and development of language remain debated. Neanderthals may also have possessed significant vocal and cognitive abilities, so language alone cannot be used as an easy dividing line. The evidence remains incomplete because words vanish unless they are eventually written, and writing is still tens of thousands of years away. But increasingly complex tools, long-distance exchange, shared symbols, and coordinated social life all suggest that communication is carrying heavy weight. A culture that can teach intricate procedures and maintain symbolic traditions across generations must have ways to organize memory beyond imitation alone. One surprising detail is how much of this world depends on materials that do not preserve well. Archaeologists recover stone points and bone needles, but the most important objects may often have been made of wood, hide, fibre, plant resin, feathers, and sinew. A beautifully made stone blade may be only the surviving part of a larger vanished object. A bone point may once have been hafted to a shaft, decorated with colour, carried in a pouch, repaired repeatedly, and used within a hunting system involving landscape drives, seasonal knowledge, and group coordination. The archaeological record gives us fragments of machinery whose missing parts were once alive with use. This makes the apparent leap both more impressive and more misleading. We see sudden complexity because certain durable fragments enter the record in abundance, but the thinking behind them may have been developing in less visible forms. A woven bag leaves almost nothing. A trap made of branches disappears. A song used to remember migration routes dies with the singers unless it is taught again. Body painting washes away. A story leaves no fossil. Yet all of these can be part of a cultural world as complex as any carved object. What survives in the record suggests a transformation. What has vanished warns us not to mistake survival for origin. Still, there are objects from this period that resist being reduced to practical function. Some carved figures are so small that they fit in the hand, yet they carry extraordinary conceptual weight. Animals are shaped from mammoth ivory with attention to posture and essence rather than simple copying. Human forms appear, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes mysterious, sometimes almost abstract. Hybrid beings combine species in ways that feel like myth before myth can be written down. These objects suggest that people are not only representing what they see, they're making things that belong to the mind's interior landscape. The leap, then, may not be a single leap at all. It may be the point where several currents meet. Larger or more connected populations allow ideas to travel farther and last longer. New environments demand new solutions. Contact with other human groups creates pressure, exchange, and perhaps competition. Better tools support wider movement and more reliable survival. Symbolic identity helps groups recognize allies, mates, kin, and strangers. Ritual or shared belief may strengthen cooperation among people who are not all close relatives. Over time, these forces reinforce one another, and the result looks sudden, because archaeology sees the crest of the wave more clearly than the water gathering beneath it. No single explanation fully accounts for this. A purely biological answer is too narrow, because modern human bodies and brains existed before the famous European explosion of art and tools. A purely cultural answer can be too vague, because it must explain why certain cultural forms become so visible in this period and not another. A purely climatic answer cannot explain why similar pressures do not always produce similar symbolic richness. A migration answer helps, But migration alone is not creativity. The mystery survives because the transformation is not one event. It is a convergence. And there is another uncomfortable possibility: the leap may seem impossible, because the record before it is missing too much. Archaeology is not a continuous film. It is more like a handful of still images rescued from a burned library. Long stretches of human creativity may have left almost nothing behind. A tradition of painting hides or bodies could flourish for millennia and vanish completely. A culture rich in oral performance could be archaeologically quiet. A people who carved wood rather than ivory might leave only silence. When stone walls finally preserve images, it looks as if imagination has arrived, when perhaps only the archive has changed. Yet the emotional force of the 40,000-year threshold remains. Something about this period brings the human mind into view with new clarity. The old world of survival does not disappear. Hunger, cold, danger, and death remain constant companions. But alongside them appears a widening realm of symbol and memory. People do not merely adapt to landscapes. They begin to cover landscapes with meaning. They do not merely know animals. They transform animals into images, figures, signs, and perhaps stories. They do not merely pass through caves. They make caves remember them. This is why the mystery still grips scientists and storytellers alike. It sits at the crossing point between biology and culture, between adaptation and imagination, between what can be measured and what can only be inferred. The impossible leap may not be a leap in the mind of one human being. It may be the moment when human minds become densely connected enough, symbolically charged enough, and materially expressive enough that deep time finally preserves their inner life. From that point on, the past is still dark, but it is no longer mute. The deeper the mystery goes, the more crowded the human world becomes. For a long time, the story was told as if there were only two figures standing at the threshold: modern humans, carrying the future, and Neanderthals, fading into the past. It was a clean image, easy to understand and easy to dramatize. But the ground has not been kind to clean images. Bones, tools, and ancient DNA have turned that simple scene into something stranger. 40,000 years ago. Homo sapiens is not walking into an empty world. Other humans are already there, with their own histories, adaptations, habits, and territories, and some of them have been there for a very long time. Neanderthals are the most visible of these other humans because they left more bones, more tools, and more sites than many of their relatives. They are powerfully built, adapted over hundreds of thousands of years to environments that could be harsh, cold, and unpredictable. Their bodies are not failures of evolution. They are solutions to a different set of pressures: broad chests, strong limbs, large noses, heavy brows, and muscular frames belong to people who survive in demanding landscapes, hunt large animals at close range, endure injury, and return again and again to places where their ancestors once lived. They are not almost human. They are human, but not us. Their lives are written in bone in ways both brutal and intimate. Many Neanderthal skeletons show injuries, healed fractures, arthritis, dental wear, and signs of physical stress. Some individuals survived conditions that would have required help from others. This does not prove tenderness in the modern sentimental sense, but it does show care, tolerance, and social support. A severely injured individual who lives for years cannot do so entirely alone. Someone shares food. Someone allows weakness to remain within the group. In that fact, the old caricature collapses. These were not mindless brutes waiting to be replaced. They were skilled survivors with bodies marked by hard lives and social bonds. Their tools, too, reveal intelligence. Neanderthals make stone technologies that require planning and control, especially prepared core methods where the shape of the final flake is anticipated before it is struck. They use fire, process animal hides, make adhesives, and exploit different environments. There is evidence that they sometimes use pigments, collect unusual objects, and perhaps make ornaments. Scholars still debate the extent and meaning of Neanderthal symbolism, but the debate itself has changed. The question is no longer whether they were capable of complex behavior in any broad sense. They clearly were. The question is how their symbolic worlds differed from those of Homo sapiens, and why some forms appear more rarely or less visibly in the surviving record. Then there are the Denisovans, who entered modern science almost like a whisper, not through a complete skull or a dramatic skeleton, but through fragments from a cave in Siberia, a finger bone, teeth, genetic traces. From those fragments came the recognition of a population distinct from both Neanderthals and modern humans, yet close enough to interbreed with both. Their physical appearance remains largely mysterious, though later finds and genetic work offer hints. Their world may have stretched across parts of Asia far more widely than their sparse fossils suggest. They survive today not as living bodies, but as fragments in the DNA of some modern populations, especially in Oceania and parts of Asia. That detail changes the emotional shape of extinction. These vanished humans are not entirely gone. Some of their genetic inheritance continues inside living people. Neanderthal ancestry exists in many populations outside Africa. Denisovan ancestry persists unevenly, in some places with possible links to adaptations such as life at high altitude. The evidence remains incomplete and complex, but the broad point is clear: the human family tree is not a tree with neat branches. It is a braided river, splitting, meeting, absorbing, and changing course. Around 40,000 years ago, this river is still full of currents. There may have been other humans as well, known only faintly or not yet recognized. Fossils from different regions hint at populations that do not fit easily into old categories. Some may represent late surviving archaic humans, regional variants, or mixtures of groups. Ancient DNA has revealed ghost lineages, populations inferred from genetic traces rather than named from bones. This is one of the lesser-known surprises of modern human origins. The past contains people we can detect without yet being able to picture. Their bodies have not been found, or not recognized, but their inheritance appears in genomes like the shadow of someone who once stood in the room. All of this matters for the 40,000-year mystery, because symbolic culture did not unfold in isolation. Modern humans arriving in new regions may have encountered people whose tools, landscapes, and survival strategies were already deeply established. These encounters may have been rare, tense, cooperative, violent, intimate, or all of these in different times and places. A meeting between groups does not need to be a grand historical event. It may be a glimpse across a valley, a shared water source, a contested carcass, a trail followed by both, an abandoned tool noticed by strangers, or a child born from parents whose ancestors had been separated for hundreds of thousands of years. The archaeological record struggles to capture such moments. Stone tools can look similar across groups or change for reasons that have nothing to do with identity. A layer in a cave may mix materials from different occupations. Dating can be precise in some cases and stubbornly uncertain in others. A bone can be too fragmentary to assign confidently. What survives in the record suggests contact, overlap, and complexity. but not a simple chronicle. Scientists can identify interbreeding through DNA with growing confidence, yet the social circumstances behind it remain hidden. The genome records that people met. It does not record whether they welcomed one another. Neanderthal disappearance is often placed near the heart of the mystery, but it should not be treated as a single dramatic vanishing. Different regions may have seen different timings, pressures, and outcomes. Some Neanderthal groups may have persisted longer than others. Some may have been absorbed genetically into expanding Homo sapiens populations. Some may have dwindled through isolation, low numbers, climate stress, competition, disease, or simple bad luck. No single explanation fully accounts for their disappearance everywhere. The end of a population can look sudden in the ground while being painfully slow in lived experience. The same is true of Denisovans, though their story is harder to follow because so little physical evidence survives. Their genetic legacy implies wide interactions, yet their archaeological signature remains elusive. We do not have Denisovan cave art or Denisovan settlements confidently laid out before us. We have fragments, sequences, and questions. In a way, they represent the limits of the record more sharply than Neanderthals do. An entire form of humanity can be known from a few bones and inherited DNA, while its languages, myths, gestures, tools of wood and fibre, and ordinary days vanish almost completely. This crowded human world complicates the idea of a single human awakening. If Neanderthals also used pigments, if they made ornaments in some contexts, if they possessed forms of planning and perhaps symbolic life, then the mystery cannot be reduced to Homo sapiens suddenly becoming human, while others remained animal-like. The boundary is blurred. It may be that Homo sapiens had larger social networks, faster cultural accumulation, or more flexible symbolic systems. It may be that demographic advantage mattered more than raw intelligence. It may be that small differences, repeated across generations, became enormous over time. Scholars still debate these possibilities, and the answer may not be one thing. The bones of other humans also force a humbling thought. The people who made the famous art were not destined, in any conscious sense, to inherit the planet alone. They lived among alternatives. Other human ways of being had existed and still existed. Other bodies carried other memories. Other groups knew the same cold winds and watched the same animals move under the same sky. When we look back from the present, Homo sapiens seems inevitable because we are the ones looking. But 40,000 years ago, the future was not settled. It was contested by climate, chance, contact, fertility, disease, landscape, and countless decisions no trace preserves. So the mystery grows not smaller, but larger. The hand on the cave wall belongs to our kind, or to humans close enough to us that the distinction can feel both scientific and fragile. But beyond that hand, in the same ancient world, are other hands that may never have touched pigment to stone, or did so in places lost to erosion, sea level rise, or simple absence of discovery. Some of those hands belong to relatives whose bones are now scattered in museums and caves. Some belong to lineages known only by traces in living blood. They were part of the same deep-time drama, not one species stepping neatly into consciousness, but many human populations moving through a dangerous world, meeting, changing, disappearing, and leaving behind just enough evidence to trouble every simple story. The tools become stranger not because they stop being practical, but because practicality begins to look more like imagination. A stone flake struck from a core is already a thought made physical. It means someone can see the shape hidden inside raw material before it exists. But around this deep threshold, toolmaking in many places becomes increasingly layered. A point is no longer just a sharp edge. It may be one part of a larger weapon, fixed to a wooden shaft with resin, wrapped with sinew, balanced for throwing or thrusting, repaired after use, and carried across a landscape where failure means hunger. The object in the archaeologist's hand is only the hard remainder of a much more complicated thing. Blades are among the clearer signs of this shift. Instead of striking irregular flakes as needed, skilled makers prepare stone cores so that long, narrow blades can be removed in sequence. This takes foresight. The maker is not merely reacting to each blow, but organizing the future of the core. A good blade can become a knife, scraper, bearin, point, or component in a composite tool. The same piece of stone can be transformed into many possibilities, and this flexibility matters in a world where people travel, hunt, butcher, carve, sew, and repair under constant pressure. Efficiency is not an abstract virtue. It is survival measured in weight carried, time saved, and risk reduced. Yet these tools are not only efficient, they are often elegant. Some are so carefully made that modern observers struggle not to call them beautiful, even when beauty was not necessarily their purpose. Thin blades, finely retouched points, polished bone awls, antler tips, and ivory rods show patience beyond the moment of need. This does not mean Ice Age people had leisure in the modern sense. It means their skill had become embedded in tradition. A tool can carry the memory of teachers. Its shape can reveal not just function, but the way a group believes a thing should be made. Bone, antler, and ivory open another world of craft. Stone breaks by fracture, but bone can be scraped, carved, grooved, polished, split, and shaped with different rhythms. Antler has strength and flexibility. Ivory from mammoth tusks allows delicate carving but demands time and control. These materials suggest people who know the properties of the bodies around them in extraordinary detail. An animal is not only meat, it is hide, tendon, fat, marrow, horn, bone, tooth, glue, fuel, shelter, ornament, weapon, and image. Nothing is simple. A mammoth may feed a group, clothe them, furnish their tools, and later appear on the wall of a cave or in the palm of a carved figure. One of the most quietly revolutionary objects from this broad period is the eyed needle. Its exact timing varies by region, and the evidence remains incomplete. But the appearance of fine sewing technology changes what humans can do in cold landscapes. To survive severe Ice Age conditions, clothing cannot be merely draped hide. It must fit, close, layer, and protect. Tailored clothing allows people to move into harsher environments, carry warmth with them, protect infants, and extend activity in bitter weather. A needle is small enough to overlook, but it may represent one of the great inventions of human expansion. It is technology pressed directly against the skin. There are also ornaments, pierced shells, animal teeth, beads of bone or ivory, pendants, and coloured objects worn or carried. These are strange tools because their function depends on being understood by others. A scraper works whether or not anyone admires it. A bead only works socially. It signals something belonging, status, age, kinship, exchange, memory, skill, beauty, alliance, or perhaps protection. Scholars still debate the meanings of early ornaments, and those meanings likely varied widely. But the existence of ornaments shows that identity itself has become material. People are making signs that move with the body. Some of these materials travelled surprising distances. Shells appear far from the coasts where they originated. Stone sometimes comes from sources many kilometres away. Pigments may be carried across landscapes where more ordinary materials were available nearby. Long-distance movement does not always mean trade in the later market sense. It may mean seasonal travel, gift exchange, marriage networks, visiting, imitation, or the passing of objects from hand to hand across groups. But however it happened, such movement hints at social worlds larger than a single campfire. Ideas can travel with objects. Styles can travel with people. A small bead can map a network no map preserves. Pigment technology also grows more revealing the longer one studies it. Red ochre is not merely dug up and smeared at random. In many cases, it is selected, ground, mixed, stored, and applied with care. Different minerals produce different shades. Charcoal and manganese provide black. Some mixtures may have required binders or preparation methods now difficult to reconstruct. Pigment could be used on cave walls, bodies, hides, tools, ornaments, or perhaps in practical tasks such as hide processing and adhesives. No single explanation fully accounts for its use across time and space. Colour becomes both material and message. A lesser-known detail is that some Ice Age technologies required chemistry as much as hand skill. Adhesives made from birch tar or plant resins, sometimes mixed with ochre or other ingredients, show controlled transformation of materials. Producing certain glues can require heating under specific conditions, managing smoke, temperature, and timing. This is not simple scavenging from nature. It is process knowledge. It is the ability to make a substance that does not exist in usable form until people create the right conditions. Such technologies remind us that the ancient mind was not only artistic or symbolic, it was experimental. The tools also reveal planning over time. A hunting weapon may be prepared long before the hunt. A blade core may be carried because future needs are anticipated. A broken point may be repaired instead of discarded. A bone tool may be reshaped through repeated use. This is a world where objects have biographies. They are born from raw material, altered by skill, marked by use, damaged, repaired, lost, recovered by archaeologists, and interpreted thousands of generations later. In that long chain, the maker's original intention is only one stage, but it is the stage that gives the object its first meaning. The strangeness comes from the overlap of utility and symbol. A pendant may be made with the same patience as a tool may be decorated, a weapon may carry identity, a carved object may be touched, worn, exchanged, or hidden. Modern categories divide art, technology, clothing, ritual, and economy. But Ice Age life may not have separated them so sharply. A beautifully worked point could be effective, admired, inherited, and spiritually charged all at once. What survives in the record suggests not separate inventions, but a woven culture where making things and making meaning belong together. This makes the 40,000-year mystery more difficult to explain as a simple spark of creativity. The evidence points to cumulative culture, the slow stacking of skills across generations. One person discovers, another improves, another teaches, another carries the method into a new valley, another adapts it to a different animal or stone. Over enough time, small improvements create a world that seems suddenly advanced when preserved in a cave layer. The leap may be the visible face of countless modest acts: better drilling, finer scraping, improved binding, sharper blades, more durable thread, more recognizable signs. And still, something remains unresolved. Many earlier humans had intelligence and skill. Neanderthals made complex tools and used varied materials. Older Homo sapiens populations also had symbolic behaviors, long before the famous Ice Age art of Europe. So why do so many strange, expressive, specialized objects begin to cluster so powerfully around this period in certain regions? Was it population growth, wider networks, more stable teaching, climatic pressure, competition between human groups? A change in how symbols were used to hold communities together? The evidence remains incomplete, and perhaps the answer lies not in one invention, but in the moment when many inventions began reinforcing one another. The tools become stranger because the people making them are turning the world into extensions of thought. Stone extends the cutting edge of the hand, needles extend the protective power of skin, ornaments extend identity beyond the body, pigment extends memory onto surfaces, adhesives extend the strength of materials by joining what nature left separate. Each object is small, but together they reveal a mind no longer trapped in the immediate present. These people prepare for cold not yet arrived, hunts not yet begun, journeys not yet taken, relationships not yet tested, and meanings meant to outlast the moment. In the cave, a painted animal may seize the eye first, but outside the cave, in camps, kill sites, workshops, and lost paths across Ice Age ground, the same transformation is happening through tools. The mystery is not only on the wall, it is in the needle hole, the drilled shell, the shaped blade, the resin seam, the polished bone point. It is in the moment when survival becomes design, and design becomes tradition. And tradition begins to carry a human world farther than any single life can go. The art that survives from this deep age often feels as if it should not exist, not because ancient people were incapable of making it, but because everything about time should have destroyed it. Skin rots, wood splits, songs vanish, stories die with the last voice that remembers them, and even stone can crack, flood, crumble, or be sealed away beyond reach. Yet in certain caves and buried layers, images remain. A horse still bends its neck, a bison still lowers its head, a mammoth still carries its heavy outline through darkness, a lion still watches from stone. These are not rough symbols, barely recognizable as animals. Many are confident, economical, and alive with observation. The surprise is not simply technical skill, it is the way the images seem to hold two worlds at once. They are accurate enough to reveal close knowledge of animal bodies, movement, and behavior, yet they are not natural history illustrations in the modern sense. Some animals overlap, some float without ground lines, some are placed deep inside caves where ordinary viewing would have been difficult. Some appear where the wall's shape already suggests a body waiting to be completed. The evidence remains incomplete, but these choices suggest that the image was not only meant to copy the visible world, it was meant to transform it. Among the most haunting creations are the hybrid figures, beings that blur the boundary between human and animal. A small carved figure with a human-like body and a lion's head, made from mammoth ivory, stands as one of the most famous examples. It is not merely strange because it is old. It is strange because it shows conceptual fusion, the ability to imagine a creature that no hunter ever tracked, no herd ever produced, and no ordinary landscape ever contained. This is imagination stepping beyond memory. It suggests mythic thinking, ritual identity, dream experience, transformation, or some symbolic world no single explanation fully accounts for. Such figures matter because they show that the Ice Age mind was not limited to recording what the eye saw. It could combine, distort, emphasize, and invent. A human-animal form may imply a story, a role, a spirit, a mask, a vision, or a way of thinking about power. Scholars still debate these meanings, and caution is necessary. It is tempting to call every hybrid a shaman or every cave chamber a sanctuary. But those are modern labels placed over vanished systems. What survives in the record suggests symbolic complexity. It does not provide a dictionary. The animal paintings themselves carry their own puzzles. The most commonly depicted animals are not always the most commonly eaten animals at nearby sites. In some regions, horses, bison, mammoths, lions, rhinoceroses, and other powerful creatures dominate the walls, while everyday food remains tell a more varied story. This weakens simple hunting magic explanations, though it does not destroy them entirely. A painted animal might relate to hunting without being a menu. It might represent danger, season, territory, identity, memory, or sacred force. The animal most important to the imagination is not always the animal most often found in the cooking debris. There is also a remarkable selectivity in what is shown. Plants are rare, landscapes are rare. The sun, moon, rivers, mountains, trees, and camp scenes are not central in most of the best-known Paleolithic cave art. Human figures are often uncommon, partial, distorted, or ambiguous compared with animals. This is one of the quieter surprises. The artist was surrounded by people every day, yet they often gave the greatest visual care to animals. Perhaps this reflects the spiritual or ecological weight of animals in Ice Age life. Perhaps humans were deliberately withheld, transformed, or represented through signs, hands, or masks rather than direct portraits. The evidence cannot settle it. The hand stencils return here with new force. Set beside animals and abstract signs, they become part of a larger visual system. Some appear in clusters, some are placed high or low, in visible chambers or more secluded areas. They may mark presence, identity, participation, passage, or belonging. A hand is both deeply personal and universally human. It is the tool that makes tools, the surface that touches stone, the body signature before writing, in a world without names preserved for us. The handprint is the closest thing to an ancient declaration of existence. There are also signs that may have served as memory devices. Repeated marks, dots, lines, and geometric forms appear across sites separated by great distances and long spans of time. Some researchers have explored whether these signs relate to animal behavior, seasons, counting, or early systems of notation. Such ideas remain debated, and no secure reading has been established. But the possibility itself is powerful. If some marks helped store information beyond a single mind, then they belong to the long prehistory of recording, not writing, not yet, but perhaps a distant ancestor of the impulse to fix knowledge outside the body. A lesser-known detail is that some caves may have been chosen partly for sound. Certain chambers echo, resonate, or carry noise in unusual ways, and some researchers have noticed relationships between decorated areas and acoustic effects. This does not prove that music or chanting always accompanied art, but it opens a compelling possibility. The cave may have been experienced with the whole body flickering light, mineral smell, cold air, uneven ground, echoing sound, painted animals, and social tension. A modern photograph flattens the scene. The original experience may have been moving, unstable, and immersive. That matters because some of the oldest known musical instruments also belong to this broad world. Flutes made from bird bone and mammoth ivory show that people were not only making images, but shaping sound. Music leaves almost no trace unless an instrument survives. So the existence of even a few flutes hints at a much larger vanished soundscape. Voices, clapping, stamping, rattles, drums, and songs may have accompanied gatherings, teaching, rituals, or ordinary life. Again, certainty is impossible, but the combination of image and sound making reveals symbolic behavior as something lived, not merely looked at. The art also shows time invested in things that may not provide immediate food or warmth. This does not mean art was separate from survival. In small groups, symbolic practices may strengthen cooperation, teach knowledge, structure identity, reduce fear, or connect generations. But the making of art still requires a surplus of attention. Someone must gather pigment, prepare tools, enter the cave, hold light, choose surfaces, and create. Others may watch, assist, remember, or restrict access. Art becomes a social event even when made by one hand. And still the strongest mystery remains meaning. Modern observers stand before these animals and feel recognition so intense that it becomes dangerous. The horse looks like a horse. The bison looks like a bison. The hand looks like a hand. Because the images are recognizable, we may assume their meaning is also within reach. But recognition is not translation. A person from 40,000 years ago could understand the animal and still live inside a symbolic world almost entirely closed to us. The image is familiar, the thought behind it is not. That distance is what gives the art its power. It is neither completely alien nor comfortably known. It hovers between evidence and silence. A carved mammoth ivory figure can be measured, dated, photographed, and chemically analyzed. But the feeling it carried in the hand of its maker remains beyond recovery. A painted lion can be studied line by line. But the reason it was placed in that chamber, at that height, in that relation to other marks, remains uncertain. Scientists can narrow possibilities. They cannot restore the vanished world of meaning entire. The art that should not exist is therefore not a miracle in the supernatural sense. It is a survival accident, a human achievement, and a scientific challenge. It shows that by 40,000 years ago, and in some roots far earlier, humans are already living in symbolic landscapes. They are not merely surrounded by animals, they are thinking through animals. They are not merely entering caves, they are turning caves into places where memory and imagination attach to stone. They are not merely making marks, they are building a bridge between the visible and the invisible. When the torch moves across the wall, the animal seems to move with it. The illusion is fragile, made of pigment, stone, light, and the eye. But fragility is part of the point. The people who made these images lived in bodies as vulnerable as ours, in climates harsher than most of us will ever know, among species now gone from the earth. Almost everything they knew has disappeared, yet the line remains. The bison lowers its head. The hand opens in silence. The hybrid creature waits between species, between worlds, between explanation and wonder. 40,000 years later, the art still does what it may always have done. It makes the unseen feel present. If the images on the walls and the objects in the ground show anything clearly, it is that a mind has begun to leave patterns behind itself. Not just single marks, but systems of marks. Not just isolated acts, but behaviors that can be repeated, taught, and recognized. Somewhere within this 40,000-year threshold, the human mind is no longer confined to what it can immediately perceive or remember alone. It begins to distribute itself across objects, across other people, across places, and across time. This is where the mystery shifts from art to cognition. The cave paintings, ornaments, tools, and signs are not only artifacts, they are evidence of mental processes that we cannot observe directly. Language is part of this, though it remains one of the hardest elements to recover. No words from this period survive, no sentences are preserved, but language leaves shadows. Complex tools require instruction. Social networks require negotiation. Symbolic objects require shared understanding. None of these can function fully without communication that goes beyond simple gesture. What survives in the record suggests a world where meaning is carried not just in action, but in explanation. Memory plays an equally powerful role. In a shifting Ice Age landscape, memory is survival. It holds roots, seasons, animal behaviors, dangers, safe places, and the knowledge of how to make and repair the tools that sustain life. But memory alone is fragile. It dies with the person unless it is passed on. Symbolic behavior offers a way to stabilize memory outside the individual. A repeated mark, a carved object, a painted animal, a pattern of ornament, all of these can act as anchors. They remind, signal, and reinforce knowledge that might otherwise fade. Teaching becomes visible here in indirect ways. A finely made blade implies someone learned how to make it. A carefully drilled bead implies instruction in technique. A repeated sign implies shared understanding. These are not accidents. They are traces of learning systems. Whether formal or informal, structured or fluid, they allow knowledge to accumulate. This accumulation is one of the defining features of human culture. It is not that one person becomes vastly more intelligent than others. It is that knowledge builds across generations, creating traditions that no single individual could invent from nothing. There is also the question of belief, not belief in a narrow religious sense, but belief as a shared framework for understanding the world. The presence of hybrid figures, repeated symbols, deliberate cave use, and possible ritual contexts suggest that Ice Age people may have lived within systems of meaning that organized experience beyond the immediate. These systems could include ideas about animals, ancestors, places, and forces that cannot be directly seen. Scholars still debate how far these interpretations can be pushed. But the evidence allows at least this cautious statement: these people were not only reacting to their environment, they were interpreting it through shared ideas. A lesser known but important clue lies in burial practices. Around and after this period, there are increasing signs that some humans treat their dead in ways that go beyond simple disposal. Bodies may be placed deliberately, sometimes with objects, pigments, or care that suggests more than practicality. Not every burial is elaborate, and not every group leaves such traces, but the pattern is suggestive. Death is being marked. The dead are not always abandoned to decay without attention. This hints at memory extended beyond the living body, perhaps even at ideas about continuity, though no single explanation fully accounts for the variety of burial evidence. The mind-leaving evidence is also the mind-shaping social structure. In small groups, relationships are everything. Cooperation, trust, and shared identity can determine survival. Symbolic markers, ornaments, body paint, gestures, signs can reinforce who belongs and who does not. They can signal alliances, kinship, or difference. In a world where multiple human groups may encounter one another, such signals could carry enormous weight. A bead or a pattern might mean safety in one context and danger in another. The exact meanings are lost, but the function of signaling remains visible. There is also a temporal dimension that begins to emerge. Humans are not only reacting to the present, they are preparing for the future and remembering the past in increasingly structured ways. A tool is made for use not yet needed. A cave is marked in a way that can be revisited. A pattern is repeated so it can be recognized again. These are small acts, but together they form a shift in how time is handled. The present moment is no longer isolated. It is connected to other moments through memory and expectation. Music, though largely invisible, may also belong here. The existence of flutes suggests that sound was shaped intentionally, not only produced accidentally. Music can organize emotion, coordinate groups, mark events, and reinforce memory. It can carry rhythm across bodies and bind people into shared experience. Without written notation, such traditions would have depended entirely on repetition and teaching. What survives in the record suggests that sound, like image, was part of the expanding symbolic world. Another intriguing detail is the possible role of altered states of consciousness. Some researchers have proposed that certain cave images, especially abstract patterns, may relate to visual experiences produced by sensory deprivation, darkness, rhythmic sound, or other conditions. These ideas remain debated and cannot be proven conclusively, but they offer a way to think about how the environment of the cave, dark, enclosed, echoing, might influence perception. Whether or not such interpretations are correct, they highlight the possibility that the cave was not only a place of representation, but of experience. The evidence for all of this remains fragmentary. There is no single artifact that proves language complexity, no single painting that proves belief, no single burial that explains death rituals. Instead, there is convergence. Tools, ornaments, art, burials, and signs all point toward a mind that is increasingly externalized. Thoughts are no longer entirely inside the head. They are distributed across objects, places, and other people. This distribution allows knowledge to survive longer, travel farther, and grow more complex. And yet, even as the mind leaves evidence, it leaves gaps. The systems that gave meaning to these objects are gone. We can see the structure, but not the full content. We can detect patterns, but not fully decode them. This is why the 40,000-year mystery persists. It is not a lack of evidence in the absolute sense. It is a lack of translation. The signals are there, but the language they belong to is lost. This creates a strange proximity. The people of this time are close enough to us that their gestures feel familiar. A handprint is immediately understood. A carved figure can be held and examined. A blade can be recognized as a tool. But the deeper layers, the stories, the rules, the meanings remain just out of reach. We stand at the edge of their world, able to see inside, but unable to enter fully. The mind that leaves evidence is therefore both revealed and hidden. It shows us that humans at this threshold are already living in rich symbolic systems. It also shows us how much of those systems can disappear without a trace. 40,000 years is long enough to erase languages, beliefs, identities, and entire ways of understanding the world. What remains is the outline of thought, preserved in stone and bone, waiting for interpretation that can never be complete. In that sense, the mystery is not only about the past, it is about the nature of human knowledge itself. Even now, most of what people think, feel, and believe is not preserved in durable form. Future observers, if they existed, would face similar gaps. They might recover our tools, our buildings, our fragments of writing, but much of our lived meaning would be gone. The Ice Age record is a reminder of this fragility. It shows how much can be known and how much remains forever uncertain. The cave, the tool, the ornament, the burial all are pieces of a mind that had begun to stretch beyond the body. That stretching is one of the defining features of being human. Around 40,000 years ago, it becomes visible in ways that still challenge explanation. The mind leaves evidence, but not answers. And in that space between evidence and understanding, the mystery continues to live. The world that carries these signs is not stable enough to let any human achievement rest for long. Beyond the cave walls, beyond the lamps and pigments and careful tools, the Ice Age keeps changing its mind. Cold advances, retreats, and returns. Forests thin into open steppe. Grasslands shift. Rivers flood or cut new channels. Coastlines move as water locks into ice and later escapes again. A place rich in animals for one generation may become uncertain for the next. For people who live by memory, this is dangerous. The land itself is rewriting the map faster than tradition can always follow. The phrase Ice Age can make the period sound simple, as if the whole planet is merely colder. But the reality is more violent and more uneven. There are harsh glacial phases and softer intervals, sudden cooling events and regional changes that strike different places in different ways. In some areas, conditions become dry as well as cold. In others, shifting vegetation alters the movement of herds. Large animals can thrive in open steppe tundra, but only if the ecological balance holds. When plant communities change, animal roots change, and human roots must change with them. Survival depends on reading these shifts before they become disaster. 40,000 years ago, humans are living through a climate system capable of abrupt swings. Ice cores and sediments from later study reveal a planet pulsing between states, sometimes with surprising speed. The people experiencing these changes do not see graphs or timelines. They see fewer animals near an old crossing. They see snow lingering longer on the high ground. They see familiar plants fail. They see rivers behaving differently. They feel the cold in the body first. Then in the empty places where herds used to be. What survives in the records suggests adaptation, but adaptation is not effortless. It is a series of risks survived just well enough to leave descendants. Volcanoes add another layer of uncertainty. Major eruptions in the Ice Age world can throw ash across huge distances, darken skies, damage ecosystems, and stress already vulnerable populations. One of the most discussed events is the Campanian ignimbrite eruption in southern Italy, around 39,000 years ago, close enough to the period of Neanderthal decline and modern human expansion to attract intense interest. Its ash spread widely, and its climatic effects may have been severe in some regions. Scholars still debate exactly how much it contributed to human population changes. It was not a simple single cause of disappearance, but it may have worsened pressures already building. This is often how catastrophe works in deep time. Rarely does one event explain everything. A volcanic winter, a cold snap, a drought, or a failed migration season may not destroy a thriving, well-connected population. But for small groups already living near the edge, it can break links, reduce births, increase deaths, scatter families, and erase local traditions. The archaeological record may later show only a gap, a change in tools, or a disappearance from a region. Behind that gap could be hunger, movement, conflict, illness, or quiet decline across several generations. No single explanation fully accounts for the human changes of this age, but environmental stress is always in the room. Climate also shapes the mystery of symbolic expression in subtler ways. Harsh conditions may encourage stronger social bonds. Groups that share information over long distances may survive better than isolated groups. Ornaments, signs, rituals, and shared stories may help maintain alliances across scattered populations. A person wearing a recognizable pendant may be more than decorated. They may be carrying a passport of belonging. A repeated symbol may signal trust, marriage ties, exchange routes, or shared ancestry. The evidence remains incomplete, but in a dangerous world, symbolic identity could have practical consequences. There is a surprising contradiction here. Environmental instability can destroy, but it can also stimulate innovation. When old methods stop working, new ones matter more. Better clothing allows movement into colder zones. Better hunting weapons open different prey opportunities. Wider social networks spread useful ideas. Memory systems, stories, and signs help preserve information across uncertain conditions. This does not mean catastrophe is good or creative in any simple sense. It means pressure can make the difference between a useful invention staying local and a useful invention becoming essential. For Neanderthals, climate instability may have been especially costly. They had survived many earlier climate shifts, so it would be wrong to imagine them as helpless before cold. In fact, they were superbly adapted to many Ice Age environments, but by 40,000 years ago, some Neanderthal populations may have been small, scattered, and genetically less diverse. If true, then repeated environmental stress could have made recovery harder after local losses. A bad season matters more when there are fewer neighbouring groups to reconnect with. Isolation turns misfortune into extinction more easily. Homo sapiens may have had advantages not because they were magically immune to climate, but because their networks were broader or more flexible in some regions. If groups exchange materials, partners, and information over longer distances, then local disaster did not always mean total collapse. A toolmaking method could travel. A stranded group might find allies. New routes could be learned from others. In this view, survival belongs not only to the smartest individual, but to the most connected population. The mind matters, but so does the web between minds. The landscape itself preserves traces of vanished routes. Lower sea levels expose land bridges and coastal plains that later drown. People may have moved through places now buried under water, leaving almost no accessible record. This is one of the great missing archives of prehistory. Coastlines are often rich in food and attractive for movement, yet many Ice Age coasts are now submerged. Entire pathways of migration, campsites, shell-gathering places, and symbolic landscapes may lie beneath modern seas or have been destroyed by rising water. The 40,000-year mystery is therefore not only buried in caves, it may also be drowned. Even inland, preservation is uneven. A group might live for generations in open-air camps and leave only scattered stone. Another might enter a cave once and leave a painting that survives for ages. This imbalance can distort the story. It can make cave-using groups seem more symbolic, or stone-rich sites seem more culturally important, simply because they endured. Scientists work carefully around this problem, comparing sediments, dating methods, pollen records, animal bones, and tool distributions, but the archive is still partial. What survives is not the same as what mattered most. The climate turns violent, and the human record becomes a record of both resilience and loss. Some groups adapt, move, merge, or invent. Others vanish from particular landscapes. Traditions may break. Skills may disappear if too few people remain to teach them. A symbolic system may die completely if the last people who understand its signs are gone. This is one of the quiet tragedies hidden behind archaeological layers. A mark on a wall may survive, while the culture that knew how to read it collapses without leaving a translation. The same instability that threatens humans also transforms the animals they depend on and imagine. Herds shift with vegetation and temperature. Predators follow prey. Species expand and contract across regions. Some animals that dominate Ice Age art later disappear or retreat. The painted world becomes a record of relationships that will not last. When a mammoth is painted on a cave wall, it is not yet an extinct creature. It is present, massive, dangerous, useful, and known. Only from the future does the image become elegy. This gives the art a sharper edge. It was made in a world under pressure, not in a timeless dream. The people who painted, carved, sang, and marked stone lived with uncertainty pressing from every side. Their symbolic lives may have helped them endure that pressure, but they did not remove it. The cave can hold memory, but it cannot stop winter. A pendant can signal belonging, but it cannot guarantee food. A story can preserve knowledge, but only if someone survives to tell it again. And so the mystery deepens once more. Around 40,000 years ago, human symbolic culture becomes more visible at the same time that climates are unstable, landscapes are shifting, and other human groups are nearing disappearance. These things may not be coincidences, but neither do they form a simple chain of cause and effect. The evidence points to entanglement. Environmental stress shapes movement. Movement shapes contact. Contact shapes genes and ideas. Ideas shape tools and symbols. Symbols shape cooperation. Cooperation shapes survival. The story is not a straight line, it is a knot. In the end, the violent climate does not explain the mystery by itself. It sets the stage on which the mystery becomes urgent. A stable paradise might preserve old habits for a long time. A changing Ice Age world rewards memory, flexibility, alliance, and imagination. Under such conditions, the ability to carry meaning across distance and time may become as important as the ability to strike a blade. The cave wall and the storm outside belong to the same story. One shows the human mind reaching beyond the moment. The other shows why reaching beyond the moment may have mattered. Encounters in the cold rarely leave clean evidence. They do not preserve themselves as scenes, only as consequences. A tool style appears in a new layer. A fragment of bone carries unexpected ancestry. A genetic signal crosses from one human population into another and remains there for tens of thousands of years. Somewhere behind these traces, people met, not abstractions, not species labels, but living groups with fires, wounds, habits, fears, and memories. They may have watched one another from a distance before approaching. They may have avoided each other for years. They may have exchanged objects, partners, routes, warnings, or violence. The record does not say clearly. It only shows that separation was not complete. By around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals overlap in parts of Eurasia, while Denisovan ancestry points to other encounters farther east and beyond. This overlap is not a single meeting at one frontier. It is a long, uneven process across landscapes of forest edge, open steppe, mountain corridor, river valley, and cave shelter. Some regions may have seen generations of proximity. Others may have known only brief contact. The evidence remains incomplete. But ancient DNA has made one point unavoidable. These populations were close enough, at least sometimes, to have children together. That fact has a quiet force. Interbreeding is often discussed scientifically, as percentages and inherited segments. But in lived reality it means social contact of some kind. It means bodies near enough to share food, danger, desire, captivity, alliance, or migration. It does not tell us whether those encounters were peaceful or coercive, rare or familiar, accepted or tense. Genetics records biological mixture, not emotion. But it does erase the old fantasy of absolute separation. The borders between human groups were real, yet porous. In cold landscapes, contact may have been shaped by necessity. A group entering unfamiliar territory might benefit from knowledge held by those already there. Where are the herds in late winter? Which valley floods? Which stone source is reliable? Which cave is dangerous because bears use it? Information like this can mean survival. It is possible that some encounters involved exchange of practical knowledge, though proving such moments is difficult. Tool similarities can suggest influence, but they can also arise independently or through shared ancestry. Scholars still debate how much cultural transmission occurred between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. There may also have been competition, two human groups using similar prey, shelters, and raw materials do not meet in an empty world of generosity. They may pressure each other simply by existing. A valley can support only so many hunters. A cave can only shelter one group at a time. A herd disturbed by one population may not be available to another. Competition need not look like constant war. It may be slower and colder, one group arriving first, one group being pushed into poorer territory, one group losing access to mates, materials, or seasonal routes. Disease may have travelled too. When long-separated populations meet, they can exchange pathogens as well as genes and tools. The evidence for specific Ice Age disease events is difficult to recover, and no single explanation fully accounts for population decline. But the possibility matters. Small groups are vulnerable. Illness does not need to wipe out everyone to change a future. It can reduce fertility, weaken hunters, isolate families, and break social networks. In deep time, a few bad decades may become invisible except as absence. Yet contact was not only pressure, it may also have been creative. When different groups meet, they bring different habits of making and seeing, a method of shaping stone, a way of preparing hide, a use for pigment, a route through mountains, a gesture of identity. All can be noticed, copied, altered, or rejected. Cultural exchange does not require equality or friendship. Ideas move in complicated ways. A useful technique can survive even when the people who first used it do not. A symbol can be borrowed without its old meaning. An object can pass between hands and become something new. The archaeological record around the time of Neanderthal disappearance includes transitional industries that have provoked long debate. Some tool traditions appear to combine features associated with Neanderthals and incoming modern humans, or at least occur during periods of overlap. Interpreting them is difficult. Were Neanderthals innovating independently? Were they adopting ideas from Homo sapiens? Were modern humans making tools in styles once attributed to Neanderthals? Were layers mixed? Dates uncertain, or categories too rigid. The evidence remains incomplete, and the answer likely varies by region, but the very confusion is revealing. The human world was not divided into neat museum drawers. One lesser-known dimension is that identity may have been visible on the body. Ornaments, pigments, clothing styles, hairstyles, scars, or carried objects could signal group belonging long before writing or flags. Most of these signs are lost, but surviving beads and pendants hint at their importance. In a world of encounters, visible identity matters. It can tell a stranger whether you are kin, ally, rival, marriage partner, outsider, or threat. It can also create boundaries sharper than physical difference alone. A shell bead may be small, but in the right context it can speak loudly. Imagine two groups meeting near a river crossing as cold light fades. Their tools differ slightly. Their bodies perhaps differ more visibly: build, face, posture, clothing, Ornaments both know fire, both know hunger, both understand the animals that move through the valley. Neither sees itself as a species in a scientific sense. Each is simply people, surrounded by others who may or may not count as people in the same way. The encounter may pass without violence. It may lead to exchange. It may lead to avoidance. It may be remembered in stories for generations, or it may vanish completely, leaving only a faint genetic inheritance in descendants who will never know the names of either side. The cold makes such moments sharper. Winter reduces choices. Firelight draws bodies close. Stored knowledge becomes precious. A stranger can be danger, but also information. Isolation protects traditions, but it can also doom a group when conditions change. Connection brings risk, but also resilience. The populations that survive may not be those with the strongest individuals, but those whose social worlds allow ideas, mates, and support to move across wider distances. This may have been one advantage of Homo sapiens in some regions. If modern human groups maintained broader exchange networks, they could buffer local disasters more effectively. More contacts mean more possible partners, more routes, more raw materials, and more chances for innovations to spread. But this should not be turned into a simple triumphal story. Networks can fail. Modern humans also died, starved, and vanished from places. What survives is not a record of inevitable victory, but of repeated narrow survivals. For Neanderthals, meeting Homo sapiens may have brought both opportunity and danger. They may have learned from newcomers in some places and been displaced by them in others. Some Neanderthal communities may have absorbed modern human genes or passed their own genes onward. Others may have disappeared without contact playing the decisive role. Scholars still debate the balance between climate, demography, competition, interbreeding, and chance. The clean image of one humanity replacing another is too blunt. The reality seems more like a long twilight of overlapping populations. Denisovan encounters widen the map even further. Their genetic legacy in modern humans shows that contact occurred somewhere in Asia or beyond, but the archaeological scenes remain largely missing. We know the consequence more clearly than the event. This is one of the strangest features of deep human history. Entire meetings can be reconstructed from DNA while the places, faces, languages, and circumstances remain unknown. The genome becomes a cave wall of another kind, marked by vanished hands. In the cold, then, the mystery becomes social. The 40,000-year transformation does not belong only to isolated artists or inventors. It unfolds among populations encountering change and each other. Culture grows not merely inside skulls, but between people. A symbol matters because others understand it. A tool tradition lasts because others learn it. An alliance matters because others honor it. Even conflict can spread ideas. Even extinction can leave inheritance. The encounters are gone, but their consequences remain. A fragment of Neanderthal ancestry in living people. A Denisovan trace carried across generations. A tool form appearing where it complicates old assumptions. A pendant, pigment mark, or blade suggesting identities in motion. These clues do not tell one simple story. They tell of a world where humanity was plural, where difference was close enough to touch, and where the future emerged not from isolation, but from contact in a changing, dangerous cold. The disappearance of the other humans is often described as if it were a clean ending, but extinction is rarely clean from the inside. It is not a curtain falling across a species all at once. It is a shrinking of distances, a silence where neighbouring fires once burned, a missing group at a seasonal meeting place, a valley no longer used, a set of tools no longer made because the last hands that knew the sequence are gone. By the time the ground records absence, the human experience behind it may have stretched across centuries of uncertainty. The vanishing relatives did not know they were becoming extinct. They knew hunger, cold, birth, injury, movement, and loss. Neanderthals stand closest to this question because their disappearance overlaps so powerfully with the spread of Homo sapiens across Europe and Western Asia. For hundreds of thousands of years they endure, adapt, and return after harsh climatic cycles. Then, by roughly the period after 40,000 years ago, their presence fades until only traces remain. The timing varies by region and remains debated in detail, but the broad pattern is unmistakable. A form of humanity that once occupied a vast world is no longer there as a distinct population. Why they vanished remains one of the most contested problems in human prehistory. Climate is part of the story, but not the whole story. Competition with Homo sapiens is part of the story, but not the whole story. Interbreeding is part of the story, but not the whole story. Low population numbers, reduced genetic diversity, fragmented habitats, disease, changing prey patterns, and plain chance may all have contributed. No single explanation fully accounts for the disappearance everywhere. The mistake is to look for one final blow when the reality may have been a slow tightening of many pressures at once. Small population size may have been especially dangerous. A group can be skilled, intelligent, and well adapted, yet still vulnerable if there are too few of them. Low numbers make every accident larger. A failed winter, a childbirth death, an injury to a skilled hunter, a disease outbreak, or a lost connection with neighbouring groups can echo across generations. Cultural knowledge can also be fragile in small populations. If only a few people know a technique and they die before teaching it, the technique dies too. Extinction can begin not with bodies, but with knowledge. This point matters because Neanderthals were not simply outclassed in every obvious way. They survived brutal environments for immense spans of time. They hunted large animals, used fire, made sophisticated tools, and cared for group members who could not have survived alone. Some evidence suggests symbolic or ornamental behaviour in certain contexts, though scholars still debate its extent and independence. Their disappearance was not the inevitable failure of a lesser mind. It was the loss of a successful human lineage under changing conditions. Homo sapiens may have brought advantages that were subtle rather than absolute. Wider exchange networks could have allowed modern human groups to recover more easily from local disasters. Larger populations could have supported more innovation and preserved more traditions. Symbolic markers may have helped maintain alliances over distance. More flexible diets or technologies may have opened fallback options when one resource failed. These advantages need not be dramatic in a single encounter. Across centuries and small differences in survival, fertility, and connectivity can reshape a continent. Interbreeding complicates the word vanished. Neanderthals did disappear as a distinct population, but not without leaving genetic traces in many living people. Some part of them was absorbed. That does not make their extinction less real, but it makes it less absolute. A lineage can end socially and biologically as an independent group while fragments of its ancestry continue in descendants of another population. The same is true, in a different and more mysterious way, for Denisovans. Their bodies are scarcely known, but their genetic legacy survives. The Denisovan disappearance is harder to narrate because their presence is so faint in the physical record. There is no rich gallery of Denisovan skeletons. No long sequence of sites confidently assigned to them across Asia, no complete portrait. There are fragments, teeth, DNA, and echoes in modern genomes. Yet those echoes prove that they mattered. They were not a marginal footnote in one cave. They contributed ancestry to later humans in ways still detectable today. What survives in the record suggests a wide, complex population history, but the evidence remains incomplete enough that much of their disappearance is still hidden behind genetic shadows. Other possible human relatives may have vanished even more quietly. Some are known from disputed fossils, some from genetic hints, some perhaps not yet found at all. Deep time is uneven in what it preserves. A population living in humid forests might leave little bone. A group using mostly perishable tools might appear poor in technology when it was not. A lineage that left no descendants and few fossils could vanish almost beyond recovery. The human past may contain disappearances we've not even learned to name. There is a painful irony here. The same period that gives us some of the most vivid traces of symbolic human life also marks the fading of human diversity. The world grows more expressive in the surviving record, yet less varied in living human forms. Cave art, ornaments, and elaborate tools become more visible, while Neanderthals and other relatives recede. This does not mean art caused extinction. It means that the rise of one kind of preserved human world coincides with the loss of others. The future becomes richer in culture but narrower in human species. For the people living then, the differences may have been understood in ways we cannot reconstruct. Did Homo sapiens recognize Neanderthals as people like themselves? Strange people, dangerous beings, kin, outsiders, spirits, or something else entirely? Did Neanderthals view incoming modern humans with curiosity, suspicion, indifference, or fear? To answer survives. The categories of species and ancestry belong to modern science. Ancient people likely carried categories shaped by language, appearance, behavior, territory, and story. Those categories could have been more flexible in some contexts and harsher in others. The vanishing also has a geographic rhythm. Populations do not disappear evenly across maps. Some regions become refuges. Mountains, peninsulas, river systems, and ecological pockets can shelter groups after they are gone elsewhere. This creates late survivals, contested dates, and archaeological puzzles. A lineage may seem extinct, then appear again in a younger layer, or linger genetically after its physical traces fade. The end is ragged, it frays. And through all of this, chance remains powerful. A storm at the wrong time, a herd taking a different route, a volcanic winter striking an already weakened region, a disease crossing between populations, a crucial elder dying before passing on knowledge. Deep history can be shaped by events too small to leave direct evidence. This is difficult for science because science seeks patterns, and rightly so. But extinction is often made from patterns and accidents together. The disappearance of other humans leaves a silence that modern humans eventually fill with themselves. After their relatives are gone, Homo sapiens become the only surviving human species. That fact now feels normal because it is all we have ever known. But for most of the deeper human story, it was not normal. The Earth held multiple human forms, different bodies, different adaptations, perhaps different voices and symbolic worlds, shared the planet. Our solitude is recent. This solitude may be one reason the 40,000-year mystery feels so profound. The handprint on the cave wall seems to speak for humanity, but it does so at a moment when humanity is still plural. Soon, that plurality narrows. The art remains, the tools remain, The genetic traces remain, but the living diversity fades. The mystery is not only how symbolic culture became so visible, it is why, in the same long turning of time, only one human lineage remained to ask what it meant. The vanishing relatives remind us that survival is not the same as superiority in any simple moral sense. It is a result of adaptation, timing, numbers, networks, luck, and the unforgiving arithmetic of generations. Neanderthals did not fail to be human. Denisovans did not fail to matter. They belong to the same broad story of minds, bodies, and landscapes struggling through deep time. Their disappearance made our world possible, but it also made it lonelier. By the time the last distinct Neanderthal communities fade, no monument marks the event, no final cave painting declares an ending, no witness records the last language, the last child, the last memory of a valley known for thousands of years. There is only absence, discovered much later by people who inherit part of the vanished world without knowing it. The bones are few, the DNA is fragmentary, the silence is immense, and in that silence, the mystery does not close, it widens. The explanations gather like tracks crossing in snow. Each one points somewhere, and none of them alone reaches the whole animal. For more than a century, scientists have tried to understand why symbolic culture becomes so visible around this ancient threshold. Why modern humans expand so successfully, why other human relatives disappear, and why the record seems to brighten with art, ornaments, music, complex tools, and signs. The temptation is always to choose one cause and let it stand like a key in a lock. A new kind of brain, a new language, a better weapon, a changing climate, a larger population, a wider social network. But the lock refuses to turn so easily. One explanation begins inside the skull. Perhaps, some argue, a cognitive shift gave Homo sapiens a new ability to combine ideas, imagine absent things, create symbols, and communicate more flexibly. This would make the art, ornaments, hybrid figures, and complex technologies feel like symptoms of a deeper mental change. It is an attractive idea because the evidence looks so dramatic, but it also has limits. Anatomically, modern humans existed long before the most famous Ice Age art, and earlier symbolic behaviours appear in Africa and elsewhere. Neanderthals, too, show complex behaviour that cannot be dismissed. The evidence remains incomplete, but it warns against imagining a single sudden spark that turned darkness into thought. Another explanation turns to language. Rich speech could allow stories, instructions, alliances, myths, and plans to travel farther than gesture or imitation alone. It could make teaching more precise and memory more durable. A group with stronger language could preserve innovations more reliably and coordinate over larger distances. Yet language does not fossilize. Its presence must be inferred from Shadow's tools, symbols, social complexity, and the anatomy of speech-related systems. Scholars still debate when fully modern language emerged, and whether Neanderthals possessed language more similar to ours than once believed. Language may be central, but it cannot yet be used as a clean dividing line. A third explanation looks not at minds alone, but at numbers. Culture needs population. A brilliant invention can vanish if too few people exist to learn it, use it, and pass it on. Larger groups, or groups connected across wider networks, can preserve more skills and create more combinations of ideas. In this view, the 40,000-year transformation may reflect a demographic threshold. Once enough people are connected, culture begins to accumulate more rapidly, tools improve, symbols spread, Ornaments carry identity farther. Traditions become harder to lose. The mystery, then, is not only the capacity of individuals, but the density of human relationships. This demographic idea has a quiet strength. It explains why small differences can become large over time. A group with slightly wider marriage networks, slightly more exchange, or slightly more frequent contact with neighbours may be more resilient after disaster. It can recover lost knowledge, borrow useful techniques, and avoid the dangers of isolation. For Neanderthals, if populations were smaller and more fragmented in some regions, even equal intelligence might not have been enough. Cultural complexity is not stored only in brains, it is stored in communities. Climate offers another explanation, though not as a simple cause. Ice Age instability may have forced innovation by making old habits unreliable. Shifting herds, colder phases, volcanic disruptions, and changing vegetation would reward flexibility. People who could maintain alliances, move through unfamiliar landscapes, and share information over distance may have survived better. Symbolic systems may have helped by binding groups together and marking identity in a dangerous world. But climate pressure alone cannot explain why some populations respond with visible symbolic richness, while others do not. Weather can create need, but it does not automatically create art. Migration also matters. Modern humans moving into Eurasia brought traditions with them, encountered new animals and landscapes, and met other human populations. Movement can accelerate change because it exposes people to unfamiliar problems and unfamiliar solutions. A migrating group must adapt, learn, and negotiate. It may carry old symbols into new environments, then reshape them. It may meet others and borrow or compete. Yet migration is not enough by itself. People had migrated before. Other humans had moved across continents. The question is why these movements at this time produce such a visible and lasting transformation in the record. Competition with Neanderthals and other humans is often drawn into the answer. Perhaps Homo sapiens developed stronger symbolic identities because encounters with other groups made boundaries more important. Perhaps ornaments, body paint, and shared signs helped distinguish friend from stranger. Perhaps improved tools, broader networks, or more flexible diets gave modern humans a slight edge. But this too is difficult to prove. Contact varied by region. Neanderthals were not passive. Some may have innovated, exchanged, or adapted in response. The evidence remains incomplete, and the story differs from place to place. There is also the possibility of feedback. This may be the most powerful explanation because it does not require one cause to do all the work. Better communication supports wider networks. Wider networks preserve more innovations. More innovations improve survival. Better survival increases population. Larger populations create more opportunities for exchange. Symbolic identity helps maintain those networks. Climate stress makes the networks more valuable. Contact with other human groups intensifies the need for distinction and adaptation. Over generations, these forces feed one another until the archaeological record begins to look like a sudden awakening. In this view, the mystery is not a single event but cascade. A bead is not just a bead, it is evidence of identity, skill, material selection, perhaps exchange, and shared recognition. A cave painting is not just art, it is evidence of place, memory, light technology, social permission, animal knowledge, and symbolic thought. A bone flute is not just music, it is evidence of sound shaped into culture. Each object sits inside a web. The transformation becomes visible when the web grows strong enough to leave many kinds of traces at once. Still, chance must be allowed into the room. Archaeology often prefers explanations that can be patterned, tested, and compared. But chance shapes what survives. A cave seals at the right moment. A pigment lies protected from water. A bone lands in sediments that preserve DNA. A coastal site that might have changed the story is drowned by rising seas. A tradition made of wood, hide, and song disappears entirely. The record around 40,000 years ago may look like a blaze, partly because earlier fires left fewer ashes. What survives in the record suggests change, but preservation shapes the shape of that change. This is why scientists disagree without the disagreement being a weakness. The problem is genuinely difficult. Different kinds of evidence point at different scales. Genetics shows population mixture and ancestry. Tools show learned behavior and adaptation. Art shows symbolic expression. Climate records show environmental pressure. Fossils show bodies, health, and movement. No single archive contains the whole story. Each is like a broken mirror reflecting one angle of a vanished world. A lesser-known complication is that the same artifact can support multiple interpretations. A shell bead may signal identity, but it may also be beautiful, protective, inherited, traded, or tied to a story. A red pigment stain may be ritual, practical, decorative, or all three. A cave chamber may be sacred, social, acoustic, frightening, playful, or restricted depending on the people and the moment. Modern categories often separate what ancient life may have joined. This makes explanation difficult because the evidence may be too rich for one label. The competing explanations remain because the human transformation itself was probably plural. It unfolded across regions, generations, and populations, not in one dramatic instant. In one place, climate stress may have mattered most. In another, population networks. In another, contact with Neanderthals. In another, preservation bias may exaggerate novelty. The 40,000-year mystery is not weakened by this complexity. It becomes more realistic. Human history rarely turns on one cause. Deep history is no different. What can be said with care is that around this broad threshold, the visible human world changes. Symbols become more durable. Tools become more varied. Art becomes more striking. Networks seem increasingly important. Other humans fade. Homo sapiens endure and spread. Whether the central cause was a cognitive revolution, demographic expansion, climatic pressure, social networking, cultural feedback, or some combination of all of them, the result is unmistakable. The Earth begins to preserve a new kind of human presence. The mystery scientists still cannot fully explain is not that humans suddenly became human. It is how so many ingredients converge to make humanity visible in this particular way. A mind capable of symbol, a group capable of teaching, a landscape capable of pressure, a network capable of carrying ideas, and a record capable of preserving traces all meet in deep time. From that meeting comes the hand on the wall, the carved animal, the bone flute, the ornament, the vanished relative, and the unanswered question still waiting behind them. Where evidence leaves gaps, imagination rushes in. It has always been that way with the deep past, a cave painting without a caption, a vanished human species without a final witness, a sudden-looking transformation in tools and symbols, a hybrid creature carved from mammoth ivory, a handprint from a person whose name is gone. These invite wonder, and wonder is not the enemy of knowledge. Wonder is often what brings people to the evidence in the first place. The danger begins when wonder is asked to replace evidence, when mystery becomes an excuse to ignore what the ground, the bones, the pigments, and the genes actually say. The 40,000-year mystery has attracted many popular explanations that reach beyond mainstream science. Some suggest lost super-civilizations teaching Ice Age people art and symbolism. Others imagine visitors from beyond Earth, forgotten global priesthoods, or secret knowledge encoded into cave walls with mathematical precision far beyond anything supported by the record. These ideas can be entertaining, but they are not needed to explain the evidence, and they usually flatten the people they claim to celebrate. They treat ancient humans as too simple to create beauty, symbols, music, and complex tools on their own, when the archaeological record shows exactly the opposite. This is one of the ironies of fringe theories about ancient mysteries. They often present themselves as more respectful of the past, but they quietly remove agency from the humans who lived there. If a carved lion human figure must be explained by lost masters or impossible visitors, then the Ice Age artist becomes a passive recipient rather than a maker. If cave paintings must be secret star maps produced by some vanished advanced order, then the people who knew animals, caves, pigment, memory, and ritual are pushed aside. The unsupported legend claims to enlarge the mystery, but often makes humanity smaller. Mainstream archaeology does not drain these objects of mystery. It makes the mystery deeper because it keeps it human. A mammoth ivory flute is more astonishing, not less, when made by people surviving in a cold landscape with stone tools, fire, patience, and inherited skill. A cave painting is more powerful, not less, when it comes from human observation, memory, belief, and hand control rather than from a fantasy teacher outside history. The difficulty of making these things does not point away from ancient humans. It points toward them. There are also popular theories that try to turn Paleolithic art into a single universal code. Some argue that nearly all cave imagery records constellations, catastrophes, calendars, or astronomical events. Astronomy may well have mattered to ancient people, and some later prehistoric monuments clearly show skywatching traditions. But for Ice Age cave art, the evidence remains incomplete and contested. Repeated signs may sometimes relate to seasons, animal behavior, or counting. But there is no accepted master key that translates all caves into one hidden message. The art varies too much across time, place, and context for easy decoding. Other explanations lean heavily on shamanism. This is more complicated because altered states, ritual specialists, animal transformation, and cave experiences are plausible in some broad human sense. Many researchers have taken such ideas seriously, especially when considering hybrid figures, deep chambers, sensory effects, and abstract patterns. But caution is still necessary. Shamanism is not one universal system, and applying the label too freely can make different ancient traditions look falsely identical. Scholars still debate how far this interpretation can go. It may illuminate some aspects of the evidence, but it cannot explain every mark, every animal, or every cave. The same caution applies to hunting magic. For a long time, many cave images were interpreted as rituals meant to ensure successful hunts. This may fit some cases, or at least some dimensions of some images, but it cannot account for everything. The animals most often painted are not always the animals most often eaten. Dangerous predators appear, hybrid beings appear, abstract signs appear. Human figures are rare and strange. Some images are placed in difficult locations where ordinary hunting instruction seems unlikely. No single explanation fully accounts for the full range of Paleolithic art, which is why the mystery survives legitimate study. A lesser-known problem with unsupported theories is that they often ignore dating. Deep time is not a vague mist where everything ancient can be freely connected. 40,000 years ago is not the same as 10,000 years ago, and 10,000 years ago is not the same as the first cities. The Ice Age artists lived long before agriculture in most regions, long before writing, long before pyramids, long before empires, and long before the preserved myths people often use to interpret them. Similar symbols separated by tens of thousands of years do not automatically prove a continuous secret tradition. They may reflect shared human tendencies, independent invention, or coincidence. They also ignore preservation. The surviving record is uneven. Caves preserve some images because conditions allow it. Open-air art may vanish. Coastal sites may drown. Wooden objects decay. Body paint disappears. If one cave contains a dramatic painting and another region preserves none, that does not mean one group had imagination and the other did not. It means the archive is partial. Fringe theories often treat the known record as complete enough to support sweeping conclusions, while also claiming the record hides vast secrets. It cannot be both at once. None of this means the mainstream story is settled. It is not. Scientists argue intensely over dates, meanings, migrations, population sizes, symbolic behavior, Neanderthal capacities, Denisovan geography, and the pace of cultural change. New discoveries can alter old interpretations quickly. A tiny bone fragment can reveal a whole population. A new dating method can shift the age of a painting. A pigment stain once dismissed as accidental can become important under better analysis. The evidence remains incomplete, and that incompleteness is real. But uncertainty is not a blank check, it is a discipline. The strongest approach to the mystery accepts both humility and rigor. It says here is what can be known with confidence. Here is what can be inferred cautiously. Here is what remains unknown. Here is what is unsupported. This may sound less dramatic than a secret ancient code, but it is far more interesting. It allows the past to stay strange without turning it into fantasy. It allows Ice Age people to remain skilled, symbolic, emotional, and intelligent without forcing them into modern stories they never told. The unsupported legends reveal something about us as much as about the past. Modern people often find it hard to believe that small groups without metal, writing, cities, or agriculture could possess rich inner worlds. This is a failure of imagination, not a limitation of ancient humans. Technology changes, but consciousness, memory, grief, fear, beauty, and social meaning do not wait for civilization to begin. A person living 40,000 years ago could know the world deeply, teach a child, mourn a death, shape a tool, recognize a pattern, fear a cave, dream of an animal, and leave a mark meant to matter. The real mystery does not need embellishment. It is already vast. How did symbolic systems grow so durable? Why did art, music, ornament, and complex tools become so visible in this period? How did different human populations influence one another? Why did some vanish while one endured? What did the signs mean to those who made them? Which parts of the story are missing because they were made of wood, fibre, song, or memory? These are not small questions. They are harder than most legends because they cannot be solved by a single dramatic answer. So the strange theories fall away, or at least settle where they belong as modern stories about ancient silence, not as explanations of it. What remains is better: a cold world, a crowded human family, caves entered with fire, pigments ground by hand, animals painted with astonishing attention, ornaments worn on bodies that felt hunger and cold, relatives whose bones and genes survive in fragments, a transformation that is real, but not fully understood. The mystery does not shrink when unsupported legends are removed. It becomes sharper, more human, and more difficult to escape. What survives from 40,000 years ago does not remain trapped there. It travels forward, not as a straight line that can be followed without breaks, but as an inheritance of possibility. The hand on the cave wall is not the first page of a book that leads neatly to temples, cities, writing, and empires. Deep time does not unfold with that kind of obedience. Cultures rise, vanish, merge, migrate, forget, and begin again. Yet something visible at this ancient threshold continues to matter. The human ability to make meaning durable, to place thought outside the body, to turn memory into object, image, rhythm, sign, and place. The survivors of the Ice Age carry this ability into changing worlds. Glaciers retreat, seas rise, coastlines drown, forests return across lands that had once been open steppe. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, and other great animals fade from many regions. Human groups follow rivers, shores, herds, plants, and seasons into landscapes that would have been unrecognizable to their ancestors. The art of the old caves remains behind in darkness, but the habits of symbol do not stay there. Ornaments, carvings, burials, decorated tools, body markings, stories, and social identities continue in forms that archaeology catches only unevenly. This is the quiet legacy of the 40,000-year mystery. Once meaning can be carried by objects, the world changes. A pendant can hold identity. A carved figure can hold memory. A burial can hold grief. A repeated mark can hold instruction. A song can hold a root. A place can hold a story. These are not minor additions to survival. They transform what a group is. A community becomes more than people sharing food and danger. It becomes people sharing a remembered world. In later millennia, that remembered world grows more complex. Humans spread across continents, cross seas, settle islands, return to old places, and enter new ones. They learn coastlines, deserts, mountains, rainforests, tundra, and grasslands. They develop new toolkits, new social forms, new relationships with animals and plants. Eventually, in some regions, people begin to cultivate crops and manage herds. Villages appear, then larger settlements, then monuments, then cities, then writing. But the deeper foundation is older than any city. Before written history can record kings, laws, debts, prayers, and wars, humans already possess the older power of making the invisible visible. It would be a mistake, though, to treat cave art as a primitive draft of civilization. That makes the past sound like a waiting room for the present. Ice Age people were not incomplete versions of farmers or city builders. They were fully human within their own worlds, with knowledge suited to landscapes many modern people would not survive for long. Their symbolic life should not be valued only because later civilizations emerge. It matters because it shows that meaning, beauty, memory, and identity are not luxuries produced after comfort. They appear in cold, uncertainty, danger, and movement. They appear where life is fragile. The legacy also survives inside the body. Many living people carry small amounts of ancestry from vanished human relatives. Neanderthals and Denisovans are not present as separate communities, but their genetic traces remain. This is not a mythic inheritance or a simple identity marker. It is a biological reminder that survival was braided. The modern human story includes contact with those who did not continue as distinct populations. In this sense, the vanished relatives are both gone and not gone. Their bones rest in caves and sediments, but pieces of their deep history still move through living generations. That fact changes the meaning of human uniqueness. We are the only surviving humans, but not the only humans who mattered. Our art, our civilizations, our languages, our sciences, and our histories emerge from a world once shared with others. The silence of those relatives surrounds everything that follows. When later humans carve stone monuments or write epic poems or build observatories, they do so as the remaining branch of a once wider human family. The achievements are real, but so is the loss. The echo of Ice Age symbolism may also survive in the way later societies imagine animals. Across much later cultures, animals become ancestors, guardians, gods, clan emblems, monsters, companions, omens, and teachers. This does not prove direct continuity from Paleolithic cave art to later mythologies. Tens of thousands of years separate many traditions, and the evidence cannot support simple lines of descent. But it does suggest a persistent human tendency to think with animals. Long before domestication reshapes the human-animal relationship, Ice Age people are already turning animals into images dense with meaning. Later myth does not copy the caves directly, but it belongs to the same broad human capacity. There is a surprising humility in this. The first durable symbols we can study do not mostly celebrate human faces, rulers, or victories. They often attend to animals, hands, signs, and forms that resist possession. The human figure is present, but not always central. The world on the cave wall is not yet a human empire. It is a shared world of bodies, forces, and presences. Perhaps that is one reason the images still feel powerful. They come from a time before humans imagined themselves as separate from nature in the way many later civilizations would. Or perhaps that is our modern projection. The evidence remains incomplete, but the images do not flatter us. They remind us that early human imagination was turned outward as intensely as inward. The legacy continues in another way: the problem of interpretation. Every later civilization creates records that outlive their makers, and every record risks being misunderstood. Undeciphered scripts, ruined cities, broken statues, lost languages, and abandoned monuments all repeat the same basic challenge that begins in the caves. People leave signs, time removes the key, future minds stand before the signs and try to reconstruct a vanished world. The 40,000-year mystery is therefore the ancestor of many historical mysteries. It teaches the oldest lesson of archaeology: evidence can be abundant and still not speak plainly. Modern science has expanded what can be recovered. Ancient DNA reveals meetings no one recorded. Microscopic analysis shows how tools were used. Dating methods place images and bones into time. Climate records reconstruct vanished environments. Residue studies identify pigments, adhesives, and food traces. New discoveries keep altering the map. Yet the mystery remains because science can recover evidence more easily than meaning. It can show that a symbol was made, but not always what it meant. It can show that people met, but not what they said. It can show that a child walked in a cave, but not what the child felt. This uncertainty is not failure. It is part of the legacy. It keeps the past alive as a question rather than a closed exhibit. The handprint remains powerful because it is specific enough to be human and silent enough to be open. It belongs to one person, one moment, one wall. but it also belongs to the entire story of humans trying to remain present after absence begins. Every grave, every monument, every written name, every painted surface, every archive and memory system that comes later shares something with that gesture. They all resist disappearance. The survivors carry the mystery because they carry the same impulse: to mark, to remember, to tell, to shape fear into form and loss into ritual, to make tools that are also traditions, to make images that are also presences, to make signs for those who already understand them, and accidentally for strangers born impossibly far away in time. From the cold caves of the Ice Age to the first villages, from painted animals to written words, from vanished relatives to modern genomes, the mystery does not end. It changes form. It becomes the long human habit of leaving traces and hoping, somehow, that someone will find them. What the silence preserves is not emptiness. It is pressure. It is the weight of everything that happened without leaving enough behind to be known. 40,000 years ago, a person reaches towards stone and the gesture survives. Around that gesture, almost everything else disappears: the name, the voice, the weather outside the cave that day, the reason for entering, the people who waited nearby, the meaning of the mark, the stories that made it matter. Science can bring the moment closer, but it cannot make it whole. The mystery remains because the evidence is both intimate and incomplete. What can be reconstructed is extraordinary. Humans live in harsh Ice Age landscapes among animals now vanished or transformed into fossils as memory. They make tools of stone, bone, antler, ivory, wood, hide, resin, and fibre. They use pigments, ornaments, lamps, blades, needles, and musical instruments. They enter caves and create images that still hold the eye after thousands of generations. They meet other human groups, exchange genes, perhaps ideas, and eventually remain as the only surviving human species. These are not guesses pulled from darkness. They are built from bones, sediments, artifacts, pigments, DNA, and careful comparison. But what cannot be reconstructed may be even larger. The lost languages alone are almost impossible to imagine. Every group had words for animals, weather, kinship, danger, hunger, tools, places, memories, and perhaps forces no modern category can capture. Those words shaped how people saw the world. When the languages vanished, entire systems of meaning vanished with them. A painted animal may have belonged to a story, a warning, a lineage, a ritual, a joke, a memory, or a teaching. The image remains, but the sentence around it is gone. This is the core of the mystery scientists still cannot fully explain. It is not simply the age of the art or the skill of the maker. It is the missing bridge between object and meaning. A carved figure can be measured, a pigment can be analysed, a cave wall can be scanned in astonishing detail. But the inner world that gave the object power survives only as shadow. Scholars still debate the balance between ritual, identity, teaching, memory, play, survival, and belief. No single explanation fully accounts for the evidence because the evidence likely belonged to lives where those categories were not separate. The silence also preserves humility. The people of 40,000 years ago were not waiting to become us. They had their own worlds, complete and urgent. Their mystery is not valuable only because it leads to later civilization. It matters because it reveals human depth before cities. Writing, agriculture, kings, temples, and recorded history. The first durable signs of the inner world come not from palaces, but from caves, camps, bones, ornaments, and hands. They show that the need to make meaning is ancient, older than the institutions that later claim to organize it. And perhaps that is why the mystery still feels alive. It is not finished. New discoveries continue to shift the edges of the story. A fragment of bone can reveal an unknown population. A new date can move an image deeper into time. A submerged landscape may one day show roots now hidden beneath the sea. A cave not yet entered may contain marks that change the timeline again. The evidence remains incomplete, but incomplete does not mean empty. It means the past is still capable of surprise. The silence preserves the most human part of the story by refusing to surrender it entirely. It lets us see enough to recognize kinship, but not enough to possess certainty. A handprint is clear. Its meaning is not. A flute survives. Its music does not. A burial remains. Its grief is beyond recovery. A vanished relative leaves DNA. Their face, voice, and final memory are gone. This is the strange bargain of deep history. The more carefully we study it, the more we understand how much has been lost. So the 40,000-year-old mystery is not one locked door waiting for a single key. It is a landscape of doors, some open, some sealed, some broken, some leading only into darker chambers. Scientists can map the passages with increasing precision, but the deepest room remains silent. There, in that silence, the first durable traces of human imagination still wait, not as answers, but as presences. The hand on the wall does not explain itself. It does something older and more powerful. It reaches. The long story slows there, where the light thins and the cave wall holds its ancient mark. Outside, the Ice Age world is gone. The herds have changed. The coastlines have moved. The other humans have vanished into bone, dust, and inheritance. The people who knew the meaning of the signs have been absent for longer than civilization itself has existed. Yet something of them remains, not enough to solve them, but enough to keep them near. Perhaps that is the final gift of the mystery. It reminds us that time does not erase everything evenly. It destroys voices and preserves hands. It takes languages and leaves pigments. It buries whole lives and saves a bead, a blade, a footprint, a carved animal small enough to rest in the palm. It leaves fragments, and from fragments we build careful stories, always aware that the real world was wider, warmer, colder, louder, stranger, and more complete than anything we can restore. Human beings have always lived against disappearance. We make marks because bodies pass. We tell stories because memory fades. We build, paint, carve, sing, bury, name, and record, because time is always taking something from us. 40,000 years ago, someone in darkness acted from that same deep impulse, whether they understood it that way or not. They placed a sign where stone might keep it longer than flesh. And stone did keep it. Through winters beyond counting, through the death of animals and the drowning of old lands, through the fading of relatives and the rise of civilizations, it waited, not loudly, not with an answer, simply there. In the end, the mystery does not diminish us because we cannot fully explain it. It enlarges the past, and perhaps it softens the present. It shows that before history had pages, before cities had walls, before kings had names, human life already contained imagination, danger, skill, grief, belonging, and wonder. The ancient hand remains open on the stone, neither greeting nor farewell, but something between the two, a mark made in darkness, still visible after 40,000 years, still asking us to stand quietly before it and remember that we too are temporary.